everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I'm joined today with a very special guest, Jeff Berwick, returning guest, obviously a real expert when it comes to the economy, libertarian, anarchists, just really deep insights on life and really how the world works, free markets and what incentivizes people to do productive things, right? And that's really what life is all about, moving forward, achieving things, goals. And he covers so much, the Anarchist podcast, the Anarcho-People conferences, dollarvigilante.com. Jeff Berwick just really does it all. Jeff, thanks for coming on Crush the Street with me once again.
It's my pleasure.
Well, you've done a great job of calling markets, being involved with crypto early, selling some crypto even, and getting into precious metals once again at the right time, and then getting back into crypto, right? You've done really a great job of doing that. And I kind of want to start off here with gold. It seems to be hanging around the $1,500 level. Central banks, we know, are buying it at record paces. A 50-year record was broken last year in 2018, and it looks like it's going to be broken again here in 2019 at higher prices, $1,500 gold. So let's start here. What does $1,500 mean to you? What does it suggest about gold in the markets?
Well, first of all, looking at gold in other currencies, it's actually at all-time highs in almost every other currency except for the US dollar. So the US is sort of the last currency in which gold hasn't hit an all-time high yet. And I think that's very close to happening in the next few months for sure, in my opinion. And to me, it's just so surprising to see gold and silver at these levels right on the precipice of what I think is going to be the biggest financial collapse of all time in the next couple of weeks or months. It's shocking. It's absolutely shocking to see. But I think it's also on purpose. I think the powers that be, so to speak, the central bankers, the media, the government, they're all the same people, control all of them. They have done an incredibly good job of trying to make sure that no one knows about precious metals. I got a question on, I think it was on YouTube the other day, or no, it was a call-in show. I was on the Richie Allen show, and someone was asking, where do I buy gold? Like, people don't even know how to even buy gold anymore. And that's on purpose. And of course, Mark Dice has done a few videos where he walks around California and he offers a 10-ounce silver bar or a chocolate bar, and everyone takes the chocolate bar. They've really done an incredible job of making sure that the average person has no idea about precious metals. You have people like Warren Buffett calling it barbaric relic and totally useless and all these sort of things. And when you look at gold, since 1999, it's actually been the best performing asset, better than the stock market, better than the bond market, better than everything else except for cryptocurrencies since 1999. So in a 20-year period, gold was the best performing asset. And when you do a survey of financial analysts, almost all of them say they would never ever touch it. They think it's crazy to even think about it. It was the best performing asset for the last 20 years, and it hasn't even got started yet. It just goes to show how well they've really managed to control people's minds and to make it so that your average person has absolutely no idea. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to have this financial crisis collapse in the next few months. And when it happens, a lot of people are going to start to wake up. But by that point, gold will be much, much higher. Silver will be much higher, exponentially higher. There will become a point very quickly, and it's already happening, where people won't even be able to buy gold or silver in exchange for fiat currency. In fact, I'm here in Mexico, in Acapulco, and I've been trying to buy gold and silver coins for months, and I can't find any anywhere here in Mexico. And that says a lot when Mexico is the largest silver producer in the world, and I can't even find silver coins to buy right now. I know if you're in the US, you can still find some, but it's getting harder and harder. And by the time that most people wake up and realize that they should own some, it'll be too late, and they won't even be able to buy any.
So let's touch on this a little bit more here. We've been at $1,500 gold now for a little while. And I know how people they get ADD about, where the prices are. If it's not moving up, it's moving down. And, they have that feeling of either extreme optimism or fear. And does it say anything to you about, where it's at now? Do you feel like people are more optimistic now about gold being where it is, or is it still a lot of denial out there for the current environment based on what you're seeing in the work you do, the people you talk to, and maybe the emails and comments you're getting?
I would say it's only the incredibly smart people who know they should be buying precious metals right now. As you pointed out, a lot of the markets is psychology, and we've now been in a bull market in, for example, the US stock market since 2008, all based on massive amounts of money printing. The Federal Reserve has actually tripled the money supply in the last 10 years. And that is what is causing the stock market to appear like it's going up, but it's not necessarily really going up. It's going up in nominal terms, but not in real terms. And even if you compare it to things like gold or cryptocurrency, well, definitely cryptocurrencies, it's in a massive crash situation for the last few years. But I think just like everything, I've gone through a few bubbles now, so it's kind of interesting. I'm getting older now. It's kind of weird to go through. I remember when I used to be the young guy who knew all this stuff, and now I'm kind of like the older guy who knows all this stuff. And I've gone through the 2001 tech bubble, the 2008 crisis, and you know, it's amazed me every time after the 2001, by the time we got to 2006, 2007, I started saying, we're headed towards another crisis here. And everyone was like, you're crazy. The market's doing well. Look, the stock market's up. And that's exactly what happened. And then after 2008, is the exact same thing has happened. And now it's gone even longer. This has been one of the longer bulls in the US stock market. And because it's gone on for about 10 years now, people think you're crazy when you say there could be some problems ahead. And that's how short-minded people get. Your average person gets very short-minded. It's amazing how quickly they forget, even 10 or 20 years ago. And of course, younger people don't even know this stuff, but even older people, they just tend to forget. So when it comes to precious metals and the overall market sentiment, in my opinion, it's incredibly bad, but that's incredibly good if you're buying. And I'm definitely buying here. And I think just like before the 2001, before 2008, we were saying the same things. We're saying the same things now, and we're hearing all the same things. People think we're crazy because look, the stock market just hit an all-time high. How could you possibly think that there could be some problems ahead? Well, there's lots and lots of reasons to think that. But if all you're looking at is the stock market, which is based in a massively inflating US dollar, then you're not going to have a very good idea of what's really going on.
Jeff, let's touch there a little bit more. You mentioned, some sort of major correction. You wouldn't be surprised if we see it in the coming weeks or months. I want to reiterate something. I mean, granted, we did have the repo rate spike out of control, which officially relaunched QE. But does it shock you how well they've been able to keep it together and piece this thing together, the central bankers, and without seeing any sort of material correction that has derailed the train from the tracks? I'd say we've seen a lot of like hiccups in the road, but nothing that really has derailed the system where it's spun out of control. Now on paper, we know it's uncontrollable, but at this point, it's as if the train is still on the tracks traveling 100 miles an hour. So any thoughts on this?
Yeah, again, looking back at the last two crashes in 2001 and 2008, everything looked fantastic at both times, right up until it didn't. And that's exactly how this always happens, is everything looks great. The stock market's hitting a new high. Everyone's really bullish and all that sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden something happens. In 2001, it just overnight. And I remember that because I had an internet tech company where we were going to take public on the NASDAQ at a $240 million valuation. And the next day, no one would answer my calls. In fact, one of the people who we were talking to about going public on the NASDAQ was Lehman Brothers. And so they definitely weren't calling me back because they shut down overnight. It was within days, this all happened in 2001, and the exact same thing in 2008. And, Lehman didn't shut down. Who was it? It was a different one in 2001. I confused 2008 and 2001. But there was one of the brokers in 2001 actually went under, and they didn't return my calls. And the same thing in 2008. There was Jim Cramer on CNBC, and someone called in, should I sell my Bear Stearns? I'm worried about my Bear Stearns. And he was like, no, do not. You're crazy if you sell your Bear Stearns. It was trading at over $60 at the time. 2 days later, it was at zero. And that's how it always happens. And so this is what tends to happen is the longer that this goes, more people get more incredulous. They think, oh, people like me must be totally crazy because it hasn't happened yet. Look, the stock market's at new highs, everything's fine, but there's going to be a day, and this happens. This has to happen. This always happens, especially in the current monetary system we have with central banking and fiat currencies and fractional reserve banking. They create a business cycle, and there will be a day, and I don't know when it is, but it's going to be soon. And I suggest people prepare now rather than afterwards, because afterwards it'll be too late. But there will be a moment, and then everything will just crash. I remember even the 2001 NASDAQ was, what was it, around 5,000, and within a very short period of time it was down at about 1,000, and you know, it's just too late to get out once it happens. So it's very important for people to be ahead. And I would say it's better to be a year or two early than a day too late, because if you're a day too late when you're holding something like Bear Stearns in 2008, you lose everything.
Absolutely. And you deal with the market psychology at the worst in those times, right? Because when you start to see something go down, you start to feel like, oh, well, maybe I'll just wait till it goes back up. And then you can't make rational decisions when things are happening so fast, which is one of the reasons why I tell people it's probably a good idea to be looking at Bitcoin now and precious metals now before we see a massive run up, because it's going to be hard to act in the moment. It's easier to act now, be positioned, and then sit back and just kind of watch the fireworks show when it's all happening and not have to be in the middle of the frenzy. But having said that, let's talk about Bitcoin for a little bit. Cryptocurrencies. You mentioned that it's in a bit of a correction, a collapse. What are your general thoughts on this? You know, and I'll point to an article that is kind of circling right now, suggesting Bitcoin manipulation, one whale responsible for basically the entire 2017 rally. And knowing the people you know, the conferences, just being in the space now for a while, is this something you would agree with or tend to think is true, that one whale is controlling the entire space and manipulating it?
I actually haven't read that article. I heard about it, so I don't know what data they have to prove that. But I do know that in things like the stock market, it's basically the Federal Reserve, the central banks, that manipulate the entire market. And the cryptocurrency market's incredibly small compared to, say, the stock market. Bitcoin's around $170 billion market cap right now. So you could just imagine that if someone like Bill Gates, who had $100 billion, he could, you know, if he could buy at today's prices, which he wouldn't be able to, but if he could buy up the entire market. So it's definitely exposed to large whales, this market. And this is what's happened recently. We saw the Bitcoin was around 10,000 a couple of weeks ago, and it did a massive crash down to about $7,000. And that all, we were looking at a massive amount of over 100 million in Bitcoin was put onto the BitMEX exchange, which has leveraged futures on Bitcoin. And we watched that a lot, and we saw that. We said, oh, this could be trouble. And it looks like what it was someone had a lot of Bitcoin. They went on, they sold a ton of leveraged puts on Bitcoin, and sold their Bitcoin, and then made more money on the sell down. And then what I think happened too is around 7,000, some news came out of China that China was going to get behind the blockchain, and all of a sudden the Bitcoin price started to go up, and then all of a sudden, wham, it went up from about 8,000 to 10,000 in about 24 hours. And I think it was those whales trying to rebuy back in. They were kind of caught without a holding in Bitcoin. So yes, absolutely, big whales affect the market, absolutely. But it's not that much different than the stock market, where you have Wall Street essentially deciding, Wall Street and the central banks deciding the direction of the markets. If the Federal Reserve comes out and prints up $300 billion of new money, most of that's going to go into the stock market. So it's very similar, and it's nothing to look down upon Bitcoin for that. And I think as the market continues to increase in size, there'll be a lot less volatility and a lot less ability of whales to affect the price. But I don't actually worry about it too much. I was on a trip when it went from 7,000 to 10,000, and then 10,000 to 7,000, and then 7,000 back to 10,000, and it didn't affect me at all. In fact, I just looked. I said I was going to buy if it went below 7,000, and it didn't. Otherwise, I would have. But other than that, I don't care if it's up or down 20, 30, 40%. It doesn't matter to me. Same with gold. I don't really watch the gold and silver price every day. I don't care. I have gold, and I know that that's going to survive through this crisis. I don't care about the day-to-day price fluctuations of it too much.
Jeff, that's a good point you bring up, and I'm curious. How did you get to that point? I tend to feel the same way, and I feel that way with a lot of my investments. But how did you get to a point where you invested in something and you've stepped back to where you don't really, it doesn't really bother you what it does? Because a lot of people, they're putting a very material amount of money into it. If they're just making it month to month, paycheck to paycheck, putting a certain amount of money into a certain investment is very material to them. It affects them, and it might affect what they eat the next day. How did you get to a point where you can kind of step back and say, I'm fine with whatever happens?
A big part of it is having confidence in my understanding of where things are going to go. And this is the critical part for investors, and I'm sure you know this, is if you're going to invest in a market, you really need to understand it. You need to actually get into it, because if you don't, then you won't have the confidence when you see these crashes. So, for example, when Bitcoin fell 30% in a few days there a little while ago, I'm sure some articles came out and said, Bitcoin's dead. And if you don't know what's going on in the market, if you don't understand all the dynamics, if you don't understand why this is going to go higher and all the reasons why, and why it's actually a safe haven for the next crisis, you can easily get bounced out of those markets when you see it go down 30% and everyone's saying it's going to die. That's where the emotion comes in. That's where we see these big crashes. And the same thing on the bull side. People get too greedy on the bull side. But it's really about having a large degree of confidence in your views. And I've been doing this now, actually started in the markets in the 1990s, around 1994. It was actually the first place that I really got invested in was precious metals mining stocks, gold mining stocks back in 1995 with BREX, which turned out to be a fraud, and diamond fields and all these things. So what's that now? I've been in the markets now for 25 years. And having seen all these things, that gives you so much more ability to understand, and especially also when you understand the underlying dynamics of all this. The thing that most people don't realize about the markets is so much is dependent on the central bank and their money printing. And very few people actually watch the actual money supply figures. And that's actually probably one of the most important figures to watch. So I've been doing this for 25 years. I've got people around me, advisors, and our senior analyst, Ed Bugos, he's a genius in Austrian economics. We understand this stuff, that very few things actually happen in the markets that surprise us, because we have a great understanding of the bigger picture. So that's how I could just sit there, and when Bitcoin's down 30% one day, of course, it kind of sucks, right? Like, it always sucks when you lose 30% of a large holding in one day. But I don't go, oh my gosh, I'm so worried. I'm just like, okay, I'll buy some more because I know this isn't going to last. And, for most investors out there, this is probably the key, that so many people just kind of invest, but they don't really spend too much time looking into it and that sort of a thing. That's a recipe for disaster. And then the thing is, well, who would you trust to help you invest? And, so many financial analysts who just are totally clueless. And I've seen so many people lose money with them. So it is tricky. It's just like anything. It's like, if you want to be a really good hockey player, you've got to be training. You got to be practicing every day. It's the same with investing. That's just where my confidence comes from. Everything I've seen, everything I've done for 25 years, seeing it all happen again, the exact same thing that happened in 2008 with the repo market now, with the inverted yield curve, with the massive amount of debt. The U.S. government just surpassed 23 trillion. It was just a few months ago, it was 22 trillion. It's going up unbelievably fast. When you understand why that's all happening and what it's going to lead to and what's going to survive out of it, which is, in my opinion, precious metals and cryptocurrencies, then I don't worry about a thing, really. And if I get proven wrong by the markets, that's another learning experience for me. But everything that I've seen shows me that I'm doing the right thing.
So Jeff, let's talk about this a little bit. You mentioned, obviously the stock market being manipulated, controlled. We know precious metals are manipulated by the banks. What about the idea that Bitcoin peaked really right at the launch of the CME Bitcoin futures? I know a lot of sound money people, they point to this as, hey, this is a problem. We've seen this for many, many years with precious metals, and now Bitcoin is exposed to, the paper game. So does this bother you at all, or what's your take on this?
I don't worry about it as much as a lot of people do. And I actually don't think the precious metals markets are as manipulated as some people think they are. They're obviously manipulated. Every market is manipulated, but there's some gold bugs who think gold should be at $20,000 right now, but it's just because of the Federal Reserve that it's not. I don't think so as much. And I would say the same thing about Bitcoin, that in 2017, it started the year at $1,000. It ended the year at $20,000. The fact that it pulled back afterwards is completely and totally natural, in my opinion. It absolutely had to. What other market goes up 20 times in a year and doesn't pull back? And we actually, just looking at technical analysis and just looking at the markets, we actually almost picked the bottom. So we told people to sell over 18,000 to 20,000 at the dollar Vigilante, and we said get into precious metals. And then we said, right after it started to come down in January of 2018, we had our price prediction as the most likely target of 3,500 on Bitcoin, and it almost hit that exact point. And then we said, time to buy again, and now it's up around 10,000. So I don't think a lot of people worry about the paper markets, how there's leverage and people can manipulate that way. But at the end of the day, they can't really manipulate it all that much. They can definitely cause a lot of volatility, which is great for traders. And but I'm not that overly concerned about it. It's something that is unavoidable anyway. And it's actually probably a good thing that cryptos are now becoming such a widely held asset or used asset that they have all kinds of markets for them, futures markets and things like that. So I'm not that worried about it. And, you know, a lot of people say, what if the Federal Reserve printed up $1 trillion and bought all the Bitcoin? Well, if they printed up $1 trillion and started to try to buy up all the Bitcoin, Bitcoin would be at about $1 million by the end of it. And I wouldn't have been selling the entire time. And then I'd sell, and then a lot of people would sell, and then we'd get into a different cryptocurrency like Monero or something. We'd be like, okay, Bitcoin's kind of done. It's all been bought up at the Federal Reserve at a top price of $5 million of Bitcoin. Let's sell out and let's go to a different crypto. So even if they were going to do something like that, we're in a good position to profit from it.
Sure. You know, Jeff, I think one of the reasons people love you so much is your transparency. You've talked about, you know, in the public, on YouTube, you know, ups and downs that you've had. And I think that's one of the reasons why you've built up such a following. And I want to shift the focus now. You know, I want to ask you, you know, what are you doing nowadays health-wise? You know, what are some of the latest things you might be doing to, you know, combat illnesses and, you know, mental health, things that you're doing to just really, you know, give yourself the best possible chance at living, you know, the most fulfilling type of day. And maybe we can focus here for another 5 or 10 minutes, and then as we wrap up this interview.
Sure. Yeah, I've done everything. I think I'm at a point now where I spend about 3 to 4 hours every morning just on myself. And it starts with things like doing a coffee enema, which I think is really healthy. And I put all kinds of minerals and supplements in it, which actually goes directly into your bloodstream. And it also cleans out your liver at the same time. And then I meditate while I'm doing that. I also do it on top of a beamer mat, which is it gives you pulses, which actually get your blood running about 10 times better than it normally does. I do that on top of a sound lounge where I play meditation music that vibrates, and the acoustics of it all, your body really reacts to it. Then I've got a home gym. I go to an outside gym if I need a special sort of work. What else did I do? Just this morning, I tried something new, and it actually was pretty amazing. It was called holotropic breath work. I don't know if you've heard of this. Wim Hof kind of does similar stuff. It's basically you just kind of breathe and you kind of like almost hyperventilate, and you actually almost go into a psychedelic kind of experience. And actually my whole body was tingling and I felt amazing afterwards. And all it is just breathing faster and faster and that sort of a thing. So all I did, if people are curious, they want to try it, I just went on YouTube, I typed in holotropic breathwork guided meditation, and I did a 30-minute one, and I just did it for the very first time today, and it was pretty amazing. So those are the kind of stuff I do. And I think to kind of like boil it all down on what I do, it's actually, people told me years ago, they said, you know, the problem with you is you have to love yourself. And to me, it was like the craziest thing you could ever say to me. It's like, love myself? Why would I ever love myself? Like, that's how I reacted to it. Like, I'd never been told my whole life that you should try to love yourself, right? And over the last couple of years, and there's a lot of just basic things. I read a book about mirror work. Someone Hayes is her name. And you just look in the mirror and you say, and it's kind of funny because it was on Saturday Night Live, that guy was doing it, like, I am great, I am happy, all this kind of stuff. It actually works because it goes into your subconscious. So I would just kind of say every morning, like 100 times while I'm meditating, I love myself. And you know, the first few days or even the first few weeks, I was like, this is so stupid. I can't believe I'm saying to myself, I love myself. And then over time, I kind of started to actually love myself, like not like romantic love or anything, but I started to treat myself like I would treat someone that I loved. And that's how I kind of look at it now. Like when I look at my daughter, like if she ever needs anything, I'm like right there. Like I want to help her. I want to give her anything she needs because I love her. But I would never do that to myself. And so now I'm just treating myself like it's someone I love. So every day I'm like, well, I'm going to do like a few hours of like health stuff. Why? Because I love this thing, whatever this thing is. Like I want to take care of it. And it's actually, I've been doing it now for so long that it actually feels totally normal. Like I don't feel awkward saying that I love myself anymore. Like it's just like I take care of this body, this mind, because these are what I'm currently occupying, right? And you know, it's just basic stuff like that. And I think so many people kind of don't know that or miss out on that. And just, you know, just taking care of yourself like you would any other person that you love.
That's powerful. I knew it was going to be deep, but you went in directions that I didn't even anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I wanted to ask you is, you know, I feel like I get these like moments or these weeks, or just like anything, you get really excited about something, you're investing in yourself, and then you kind of go into a lull. How do you stay so on top of it, stay on, you know, motivated and just so passionate about it? I mean, we're doing this interview off the cuff here, and you're like, yeah, this morning I woke up and I did all these things. I mean, I didn't catch you on an off day. I mean, how do you stay that motivated about doing what you do?
Well, I can say that I haven't been like this for a long time. It's actually been fairly recently. I still, of course, have my days or even weeks where I'm kind of down. I'm not like totally right on, you know, happy and on top of things. But I've kind of like developed to a point. I basically started at zero of complete depression, I didn't love myself. I hated myself, probably is a better word. And I was just always on this kind of like low energy sort of a thing. And just gradually, and this took a couple of years, but starting with a lot of physical health stuff, because it's incredibly important to just get some basic exercise every day, get the blood moving. That actually gets your serotonin going and all these sort of things. And the food you eat is incredibly important. You know, putting in something. I've got so many supplements here. I'll have a pizza. I'll have some tacos sometimes. I'll still have that kind of stuff. But in general, I'm always trying to get the things that my body needs into it. When you do that, then your mind becomes a lot clearer. And when your mind becomes a lot clearer, you can start working a lot more on your mind, which is a lot of meditation. And I've done a lot of therapy and stuff because we're all got problems. And then once you've got the mind and the body working quite well, I'm all of a sudden, instead of being at zero all the time, I'm at like 90 all the time. So I might go down to 80 or 70. That might be my bad week now. Whereas in the old days, I'd be at negative 20 or something like that and trying to kill myself, basically. So it's sort of like just taking care of yourself to the point where your body's quite good. And when it's running really good, then your mind is really clear. And then get your mind really good. And that, a lot of therapy, meditation, that sort of stuff. And when they're both running really well, you almost have this, like, it was hard for me to believe when people told me this years ago. They're like, if you do this stuff, you're going to feel really good every day. And I was like, it's impossible. I've never felt good my entire life, right? And now, yeah, I feel pretty good. I was just driving this morning. I actually went to the spa this morning. I totally take care of myself now. It's like, just like it was my daughter or something, like, let's take care of this person. And I felt so good just driving there, especially after doing the holotropic breath work. I was almost like, it's almost like ecstatic, like ecstasy. I was just driving. And I remember 3-4 years ago, if I had to drive anywhere at like 11 in the morning, anytime, I'd be like, this is the worst day ever. I hate this. When am I ever going to get to the spa? Oh, I hate this traffic. And now, because everything's running so good, I'm just kind of like in this kind of zone all the time of just general happiness.
That's powerful. Jeff, I mean, I want to give you an opportunity here to just, you know, we talked about a lot of things. Do you want to share some closing thoughts on, whether it's money or health or state of mind. What is your advice for people, as they try to navigate what is going on here in these unprecedented times, really these extreme boom and bust cycles that we're dealing with, maybe a better financial situation, maybe not so great of a financial situation. I mean, what is your advice for people in general?
Oh, it's tough, but one thing I've been thinking a lot about lately is, we're always searching for happiness outside of us, right? I'm going to eat this; it'll make me feel good. I'm going to, have sex; it'll make me feel good. I'm going to, I need this, and my hockey team needs to win. Then I'll feel good. If I make money in the markets, then I'll feel good. People are always looking external for happiness, and what I've kind of understood and found out recently is that nothing external is going to make you all that happy. It actually has to be internal, and you can actually get that. And when you have that, then it doesn't really matter that much what happens in the outside world. In fact, I kind of look at the world now as it's sort of like a movie. It's like I'm in a movie and I'm just watching it and enjoying it just like I would any movie. So when I see the markets, I'm just like, I almost have my popcorn. I'm like, what's the market's going to do next? This is very interesting. This is fun. If it tanks and I lose a lot of money, it's like, oh, well, I guess I have to learn about that now. That's interesting. But I never really tie it to my own kind of happiness. Like, for example, if Bitcoin went to $1 million tomorrow, I'd be incredibly rich. And many people who listen to me be incredibly rich, I'd be like a hero. It wouldn't change my general view or mood all that much. Like, I don't know if I do anything different tomorrow that I'm not doing today. And I'm not super rich, by the way, but I don't really care. All this stuff is kind of meaningless. All this material stuff is kind of meaningless. Like, to me, what's important is your health. If you don't have your health, then you have nothing. Then it's the relationships, the people in your life that you love. And then, if you have the basics beyond that, if you can get access to decent food, and a lot of that's just growing your own garden, and if you can have enough assets to do the kind of things that you want to do, for me, that would mean things like traveling, which I love. So as long as I have enough money to travel and I can eat decent food and have a nice place to sleep, that's all I really care materially. Like I said, if I became a multi-billionaire tomorrow, I don't think much would change. I'd probably buy a private jet because because the flying on in airports today is horrible. But other than that, I don't think I'd really change much at all. And the same thing, if Bitcoin went to zero tomorrow, that would totally suck, because the reason it would suck is so many people have listened to me, and if it does, I'd feel like crap because a lot of people would lose money because of me. But for me personally, I'd be like, wow, I was totally wrong on that one. Okay, I guess I'm gonna have to, cut down on some bills here for a while until I can figure out something to do. But I don't think I'd be distraught. So, a lot of people, when they lose all their money, they, I hear this all the time, they kill themselves. It's like, I've gone down to zero numerous times, and it's never really been much of an issue for me personally. And that's even before I got into all this sort of health stuff that I've been into now. So, a lot of people out there, and so many people worry, right? Never, try not to worry. And this is where meditation comes in and that sort of stuff. The more that you worry, the more that you're in fear of things, the more it actually happens to you. I don't know how it all works, but your like energy attracts like energy. And if you're always in a positive mood and always positive, a lot of positive things will happen to you, and the same on the negative. So I personally, I never really worry too much. I just don't, life is pretty dynamic. Like, we're all going to die at some point. Just enjoy the ride, just sort of like Bill Hicks said, and not worry too much. I see a lot of people, they're always so worried and their life just keeps going kind of like crappy. And then you see other people and they're never worried and their life seems to go quite well. And it's not a sure thing that's going to happen, but there's no reason to worry. There's no reason to have fear. It's like, there's literally no reason to do that. And all you're doing is causing yourself a massive amount of stress about what might happen. Why not just live in the moment and just whatever happens, just adapt to it?
Jeff Berwick, everyone coming with the fire. My goodness, I needed this probably just as much as anybody else listening to this podcast today. Jeff, thank you so much for your time here at Crush the Street and just, really pouring your heart out to us and, sharing with us your knowledge on what's happening in the markets, precious metals, Bitcoin, and obviously just health, physical health, mental health, just such powerful things that are just so significant for our day-to-day lives, you know, and it's all intertwined. You know, that's one thing I tell people, you know, what I do with my work, it's not just work. I don't check in at 8 and check out at 5 and then do a different thing. I mean, I'm not consumed with what I do, but it's my life. This is all part of my life. And I just love the things that you had to say. So thank you so much for coming on Crush the Street with me today.
My pleasure. Peace.